Nah, I got something to prove and I ain't never gonna give up. Plenty of juice and I ain't never gonna waste it. Something to do and I ain't never wanna quit it. So come on, get a little bit, I know you wanna play with it.
Coming to you from Studio Iguana Monk down in the Big Dirty, it's the Twisted Pop Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a working artist living in the real world. Please welcome your hosts, Larry Lines and Troy Wingstop.
Do it again.
Yep. This is the Twisted Pop Podcast, episode 25. It's an I Hate Art episode, our Thanksgiving episode. I hate Thanksgiving. I hate Thanksgiving. T-H-A-N-K. Yes.
Yeah. How many times do you get to say that a year?
Thanksgiving?
Yeah. You were saying that you didn't have any artifacts.
No, but what you were saying something you were talking about on the way over here.
Oh, I was just thinking of how much stuff that I've lost, like portfolios and like artwork.
Yeah.
I had artwork stolen from shows.
You had a whole show at Downtown Grounds.
Yeah, it was just stolen. And
how did that happen?
It could have been a combination of a couple things. That whoever curated it didn't curate it properly and said, come get your artwork by such and such time. We like artists to pick up their stuff. This is before anybody can compare anything on the internet to one another.
Yeah.
And so people just didn't really know how to curate shows. They just throw these shows together, and I had about 9 pieces stolen. Or thrown away, or whatever. I mean, everybody else's artwork was there. So, I don't know, maybe it was a heavy critic. But
they wanted to destroy something beautiful.
It seems very defeating, right? But, being able to show up like a dumb dog, I guess, just to continue. I've dumped whole cups of coffee in my portfolio one year.
Ooh.
All
Wow.
of a sudden,
I can't imagine putting a portfolio together.
Not just a regular cup of coffee either.
Yeah.
I was doing a bunch of illustrations to submit, and I never submitted them. And I was, I wanted to do at least 5 to 8 pieces to submit. And it was just like this giant big gulp of coffee that I would get. I'd go out and I'd hang out with friends, and then I'd come home and I'd work on this and listen to KPFT all night, right? And then it was one of my favorite things to do. And I sat down, and I had everything, and I went, oh shit, I got to get that. I mean, it just started to. And I got up and I picked up the board and I went like this and knocked a whole cup of coffee right in the portfolio. I mean, perfectly. Just on everything that I've been working on, including the piece that I hit. It fucking lapped over.
You lost literally everything.
Literally every piece of it.
That's funny.
One piece had been recoverable, but then there was a ton of other stuff in there too. But you were saying the things. That
well, I don't have any artifacts.
Yeah.
So, physical artifacts for writers and for musicians, right? Mm-hmm. So I've written a lot of songs that I can't say that I've forgotten, but there are no artifacts out there about them. And I won't do anything with them because I hate those songs now. And to revisit something that I didn't get an artifact before is terrible, right? I mean, I put one on the only CD I've ever done, full length album in 2003, 2004. One of the songs that me and Mark wrote together, Mark Pringle, and it's nothing like what it was. So the idea and everything that went with it, and there are whole songs. I would say there's probably 50, 60 songs that I wrote with Mark Pringle that are never gonna do anything with them. And that you realize as I'm thinking about this and talking about it, how I got to the end of the 90s and had not much to show for it, and why I was like, I don't want to be in another band.
Yeah.
Because I had absolutely nothing. I had 10 years of really hard work with multiple people, even the stuff I did at Berkeley. Like, there was nothing to show for it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, of course, the digital revolution was happening just then,
Yeah.
into the 90s. And then I didn't really get into recording as much. And Aaron Trum came along and said, hey, let's produce this record. And I was like, I got at least 12 songs that I've already written, right? Like I said, I've got 50 or 60 of them.
Yeah.
I put 2 of them on, and one of them was wholly written by Mark Pringle, and another one was co-written with him. But then the writing is the same thing. I've got little artifacts everywhere, all over the internet. I have shit that I've written, and I've written so much. And the only thing I have to show for that, of all the work that I've ever done, really the only thing that I have to show for anything, is the blog that this podcast is going on.
Wow.
So I think it was like 90 or 100 entries that I did in 2009 in that blog. And some of them I'm really proud of, but the main thing is that they're just there.
Yeah.
Like, that's just it. And what's terrible is people that I know that were on LiveJournal.
Oh.
And I've got stuff up there too, but writing every day. And then when the writer goes back and looks at something after the fact,
Yeah.
it just looks like shit. It looks like, I woke up today and I had a cup of coffee and then I whined about my day, right? But there's a lot in there. You have to leave it alone if it looks like that to you, and then you come back to it or leave it for something else. And so I've known a couple of people that are just like, I just don't need this anymore, and they just delete the whole journal.
Yeah.
And it may be meaningful to somebody else. Yeah, man, I'm gonna reference the Joan Didion documentary all the fucking time, because that shit was so amazing. But
go ahead.
But she's the way that they were doing stuff in the 60s into the 70s with their writing, John Donne, her husband, and Joan Didion, was that they were writing books and they were traveling around and they were supplementing their income, writing articles for like the Saturday Evening Post and Time and Newsweek and all kinds of shit, Vogue, and they're just whipping stuff out, like they're researching books, right, and writing, and then they're writing stuff, and there's no way they could know like what they had written. Like, that's because they had written so much, and those artifacts, especially if you're traveling.
Right.
It's like, I've got a box full of paper. I was able to get this into an envelope and send to an editor. And that editor went, I need something to fill some space, and Joan Didion wrote me something. Oh yeah, the front is supposed to blow in right now. It's supposed to cool off like 15, 20 degrees in the next hour.
Sounds like it's right at the door.
Oh man, it was really, that was a gust of wind. Anyway, so when I think about some of these things, like, imagine, 25 years after the fact, going back and reading something that in Vogue, right, that you just felt the same way in LiveJournal, right? Like, you're just like, oh, I woke up and I had a cup of coffee and I whined about my day.
Right.
Because really, that's all they were talking about in those articles was their experience of being in Southern California, researching Cesar Chavez and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It must have sounded really stupid. And anyway,
well, yeah.
This is kind of the idea with this, is that I had songs when I was 17 that people knew that I did, and I fucking hate the idea of them. I can't even stand to think about them. They leave me in that sort of shame spiral where I'm like, why was I even born?
Well, is this the same reason why, like, musicians who are classically trained just don't go to rock shows?
Oh man, I would assume so. Like, I've had a lot of interaction with a lot of different types of musicians.
Just go, I can do that.
Or the other part of that, which is, I'm not having nearly as much fun doing what I'm doing as they are. and this is just it hurts. Like, and I don't know if I've told this story on this podcast.
So bizarre.
But there was I can't remember his name, but Daryl introduced me to it. He's always introduced me to people. Introduced me to a cellist in the Houston Symphony when I moved back from Berkeley, and I don't remember what we were doing for him. We were like, it probably involved steel and doorways or something like that, but we were fixing something on his porch with steel, and we were driving around, and I was driving with him. And he had just had carpal tunnel surgery, and he was like, yeah, the Houston Symphony paid for it, and I got all this really great, and I got like another 2 or 3 months off so I could recover, and I'm back at the Symphony. It's pretty cool, and it was like sounded like a press release, right? And I was like, man, what's it like with this? You're a cellist for the Houston. This is a gig. This is the thing. And he was like, hemming and hawing around all this shit, and then I said, oh, come on, man, it's got to be a cool gig, and he was like, let me tell you, man, everything just turns into another gig. Everything turns into another gig. And I was like, oh my God, it's a full-time job. You have a full-time job playing the cello for the Houston Symphony. Oh, that's so disappointing. You know what I mean? It's like, it's disappointing in like some bizarre...
No, that I know that's what happens.
Yeah.
Like, people say this all the time, right? Like, oh, it must be really cool to fucking do that.
So when you go to a rock show and you've been listening to a middle manager, a conductor, right? You've got a middle manager called a conductor who is a guest conductor. He actually elaborated a lot more about what he meant by that, because I was like, oh man, I can't remember the name of the conductor that was heading the Houston Symphony at the time. He basically put the Houston Symphony on the map because nobody expected him to take a job as the music director. And I was like, man, you're under that guy. And he was like, oh man, he's such a dick. And I was like, that sucks. You work for middle managers. Yeah. And you're not giving me much hope about where you would go with something like that. So if we talked about rock shows, like with that guy, he'd be like, it kind of, and I remember him saying one time, he was like, I went and saw a reggae show and they looked like they were having so much fun, and it was so depressing to me.
Oh man.
All this sucks, for like, selling tickets to, like a fucking...
It's that
symphony.
Jaded thing, man, that like just makes me laugh my ass off.
This guy's making like, this is like, the ultimate in terms of gigs.
Yeah. Like
they even say this on, somebody's talking about Joan Didion and John Dunn, and they're talking about the Writers Guild in California, and every time they said health insurance, they said it was like some magical thing. The Writers Guild, you get health insurance, and they're like, health insurance.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's like
I just
musicians.
Spoke to this wizard who told me I was going to get health insurance. Yeah, so the jaded part of it, I guess, that I'll lead back to is like segueing off of that. I know like so many talented like fine artists who are classically trained, and here's the breaking point. I think like one of them is like so talented, his scribbles are like better than anything I've ever accomplished. You know what I'm saying? Just his mindless scribbles.
Yeah.
But he's so jaded about like the art world that he hates it. He can't be involved in it. To the point where it's just like he can't stand it, right? And the other one is an artist that we know. I'm not going to mention her name because it's like it's a tragedy story, but she had lots of shows on the West Coast, and super talented, and had tons of work, and she had a manager that she knew really well. I got to be careful here. And
I'm thinking as you're saying this that I'm glad I forgot the cellist's name and the conductor's name. So, and
he suddenly died. Right, and all of her stuff was secure, but she didn't live on the West Coast in a storage facility. But she didn't go pick it up for a year, multiples, whatever. And the wife, after he died, suddenly like started to go through the storage and wanted to get rid of the storage and just threw her shit away. And it broke her. Like, she didn't do artwork again.
Ever. To this day.
Yeah, like, not to that level. I mean, does she occasionally hobby around with paint? Yeah. But not the same body of work. It just broke her. And so, like, how many times have we heard, like, some story like that, like, based off those two phenomena?
Yeah. I mean, like, people stealing your stuff, you know.
And any of those gave me an opportunity. Like, the first art school that I went to, I lost my portfolio just because I didn't fucking go get it. It was like neglect, right? And any one of those times that I've lost, like, artwork, tons and tons of artwork, could have been this opportunity just to quit. And how important it is to just do the work.
Well, it is, you know, all of that being said, right? Like, I really, my own work and the stuff that I'm doing and the music that I'm writing right now, if I were sort of dedicated to resurrecting the stuff I was doing before, then that would suck, for one, because I'd spend a lot of time doing it, and it's not that good. Like, it's, you know, who cares if it's that good or not? I mean, Ace of Base Saw the Sign. It's not a good song. Right, but it's a moneymaker, right? Who gives a shit whether it's good or not? It's not. That's not for you to decide after you put it out there. It's like just the putting it out there. But if I spent time doing that, or like, you know, I use this as an example, but they're multi-millionaires. But like, if you go out on the road and you do Whole Lot of Love for like 30 years, you're just like, Whole Lot of Love,
or
right?
How Aldo Nova, what's his name, the lead singer?
Oh man,
the lead writer wrote like all that shit for Celine Dion.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing that's weird though is sort of the cross pollination of the late '70s into the '80s, where Carole King and Patti Smith and the Boss, Bruce Springsteen,
the Boss.
You know, like these were songs, like a lot of the songs that we think of were like co-written by people that would never cross-pollinate now. You would never see Metallica and Taylor Swift partnering on a song. Like, you know, Kirk Hammett goes,
so
shit,
funny.
man, you know, I'm fucking stopped with this song. And somebody goes, you know what, you should just give that to Taylor Swift and see what she does.
Yeah, she's next door.
Yeah, just give it to her, see what happens. Yeah. Like, that's something completely lost. And we end up with, like, really uniform genre.
Yeah. Because
we don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
There are other mediums where it's happening, like, you know, Disney films, right? Like this, you know, so many musicians involved in that shit, but no more of the, you know, oh wow, you know, one of Patti Smith's most popular songs was started by Bruce Springsteen.
Like, could you sit down? This is the thing. Like after all this, and like with those suggestions, if someone suggested, hey, could you sit down and just do a heavy rock and roll album?
Man, that would be fun.
So that's the question. Like, why don't we do that, right? Like after so many things, like why don't you just do something that's fucking completely fucking fun?
Yeah, you know, that's funny because I think about stuff like that too. You know, Malcolm Young died last night, and I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh man, that sucks. But you know, there's going to be so many baby boomers that are dying anyway, and he's 64, and you know, so if my Facebook feed would just be filled with grief.
Every day, yeah.
And but I did see them 3 times, right? You know,
yeah.
And that's stuff that I love.
Right.
Like that is like. I mean, I hear an AC/DC song, I go, I still fucking love that shit. Right. That's awesome. Right? And a lot of it is Malcolm Young sawing away on that fucking guitar, right? Like, it's just some really brilliant shit. But I forget that a lot of the time, like that it's supposed to be fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like you enjoy this, you enjoy doing this, and then you get kind of caught up in this. Well, I'm still doing it, and I'm 47, and you're like, well, what do I have to show for it? I had a lot of fucking fun.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
so, you know, giving yourself tasks like that could be a lot more meaningful than something that you think of as deeply meaningful, just because it's fucking fun.
Right.
It's like it doesn't have to be. This,
Well, it'd be an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and you think about that a lot before we were digital, we weren't taking slices of things. We actually had to be good at them. Actually, this is funny. So I was in the car and I queued up Saturday Night Fever for Iggy when I picked him up,
Yeah, yeah.
just to see what the kids would think of it. And I kind of predicted what Iggy would say, which was pretty funny, because he was like, "Man, you could totally tell that those strings are not digital. This sounds so fucking good."
Yeah.
And remember how, like, at 14, how, like, dismissive we were of shit like that?
Yeah.
Because everybody was having to record analog, right? So it was like, well, I don't like that particular thing, you know, the way that they did that.
Right.
But now it sounds so good because everything else sounds like such shit.
Well, or like the mindset, like when synthesizer hit the scene, like really heavy. Like every 80s song had some kind of synth. Well, not every, but you know.
Most of them did, yeah. And
Like
Rush started using them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like that mindset, right? And then I get in this. I'll be on these. I do these production gigs with this dude who's in a band. I won't mention his name since we're not like going down that road either. But Don West. I do these production gigs with him, and he's with everybody that you would recognize on the scene, right? Like, and we talk about music like all the time, and modern music, and then versus like something like The Cure will pop on, because there's always something over on the overhead, and he'll go, "Oh, I don't like that particular Cure song because of this," and my big point with him all the time is he had a band, and he goes, "Oh yeah."
He had a band?
Yeah, like how many people don't have a band
Yeah.
now, and it's just all electronic, blah blah. Right?
That's true. He did have a band. And I've seen The Cure twice now.
Yeah.
And the fucking guitarist.
He had a band. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the point.
Holy shit. Like everybody in that band is good.
Yeah.
Like they keep time.
Yeah.
Like that's a I mean, it seems like such a stupid thing to say, but the drummer sits up there and he puts together a show,
Yeah.
right? Like that's,
Yeah.
and he goes from one end of it to the other, and how much of it is just like somebody standing up
Yeah.
there, like anyway, unless it's like a giantly expensive production,
Yeah.
like that's on tour just to do that kind of shit.
Yeah, he had a band, and so that's the big standing point now, is that he'll turn around. They had a band.
Yeah. And I think about stuff like that, like what you actually had to do in the 70s, like to get into a studio.
Yeah.
Like you just had to convince somebody that you could be in there. Like the stuff that you had to do to get into a fucking a studio was so ridiculous. And if you had to do multiple takes, you could be blowing $10,000.
Right.
Like you go, oh man, you just had to fucking
Right.
blow another hour in the studio. We're gonna be here a whole other day, and that's like a fucking fuck ton of money. You could, with $10,000, I could have a fully equipped studio in here,
Yeah.
and just live in it all day, right? And they're thinking about things totally different. Like those are different problems. And that Saturday Night Fever album, you know, you think about everything that they were doing, because they still had songwriters that were, and artists and repertoire people who would connect singers with songs.
Yeah.
And so they had all these songwriters sitting around and go, oh yeah, we're going to do a disco thing. And they're like, that sounds like fun. We'll write these really overwrought disco pieces for the Bee Gees and everybody else that's going to be on the soundtrack. And then they sat around, they fucking hiked this tape around 3 continents, trying to get all this shit recorded with like 200 tracks of like fucking strings and horns from different cities. It's ridiculous. It just reminds me of cocaine.
You know, it's a motivator.
That's right.
I hate art. Art is stupid. Art is boring. ARTT art.
Stephen Pressfield the war of art. Are you paralyzed with fear? That's a good sign. Fear is good. Like self-doubt, fear is an indicator. Fear tells us what we have to do. Remember one rule of thumb. The more scared we are of the work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it.
Yeah. It reminds me, because I have my first thoughts on this. So I have a general anxiety disorder. So like I'm always having anxiety attacks, and a lot of them have landed me in the hospital from many different cities. I've been in the hospital because of anxiety. I've been in the hospital in China with an anxiety attack. They run a lot. They run a lot of tests there. So anyway, I've had it for so long, and I've been doing well with it recently. And you would think that what I'm saying is that I'm doing well with it because I don't have them anymore. But that's not it at all. Is that I had the thought about 5 years ago that if I wasn't having anxiety about it, then it wasn't worth doing. Like and then I also noticed another thing, that there's a small switch in your brain that identifies this feeling as excitement or anxiety. Right? It's a pretty small switch, but it's a big switch in terms of like the hormonal output. Like if you experience anxiety, you have a bunch of cortisol in your system with the adrenaline, and then that seizes up your muscles, and you don't perform as well, and you kind of have flop sweats, and everything fucks up, and you stink, right? But if you experience it as excitement, you don't have the cortisol to the same levels. So like you can take it one way or another. You're like, oh my, I have an elevated heart rate, I'm dying. Or you could go, I have an elevated heart rate, I'm about to really enjoy what I'm doing. Right? That's it's such a strange thing to think. But since I've said to myself, like a mantra, if I'm not having anxiety, it isn't worth doing. Yeah. Then I've gotten a lot better at being there rather than waiting for the moment to be over. Whether it's performing, and I did a lot of stuff on in public speaking in front of hundreds of people over the last 5 to 8 years. Executive meetings, stuff like that. This is all not art. Yeah. But I don't think I found my voice until I was doing all that. And sure, if I'm feeling fear, that's what I hear him saying. It's like, it's not worth doing. Right. If I'm just going to sit in go in a place where I'm not afraid, then I'm really not doing anything. And if I'm trying to find, some sort of institutional value in not being afraid, like, you know what I mean? Just walking my way away from the ledge. Nobody did anything that way. Like, I mean, we look at things as if they're already done, and everybody was not afraid. But shit, I think it's everywhere. There was a story that in the 70s that Tom Petty used to throw up after the second song in every set.
Iggy Pop had some things like that too.
Oh, no shit?
Oh, man.
You just would never think of Iggy Pop.
I know. He said he'd just get so rung up, like before a show that he'd fucking throw up. And I think that's where some of that punk rock mentality fucking came from, is like the things that he would do.
Yeah, and if you think about it, like being more punk rock is experiencing it as excitement.
Yeah, he when I saw him at Numbers, Brick by Brick, he had these huge scratches where he had fucking scratched himself before he'd fucking come out on stage. Like, just like these fucking welt of scratches, like fucking across his fucking midsection.
Man, I mean, that's raw.
Yeah.
That's some raw shit right there. Like, it's like, because I can imagine that. It's just, I don't think I'm getting closer to putting myself in situations like that. But I'm still walking myself away from the ledge. I do it all the time.
Yeah, he described it like in Give Me Danger as like just letting the demon out. He's normal until he goes on fucking like tour, and then it's just like the fucking demon comes out. He just lets it out.
That's awesome.
That's how he refers to it, as the demon.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And being able to connect the sort of emotional content of your character, like to your what you're doing,
Yeah.
like whether it's writing or, it's always so hard because you just want to run away from it. Like that's the thing, is that you have these intense emotions. They're always going to be intense. If you notice them, they're intense, whether it's grief or whatever the fuck you're talking about.
Right.
And then you just want to get away from it.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, like some wounded cat. Ah!
Cat in a glue trap.
Yeah. I mean, where do you go with that? I mean, what does it make you think about? Like that
well,
quote?
Going off of I've only experienced anxiety like twice in my life. And I didn't identify it as anxiety attack like the first time that it happened. I just went, something's wrong.
I am malfunctioning somehow.
It was so sterile and so robotic. Like, what is data?
That's right. Give me data. What's going on?
The next time I experienced it, I mean, it's going on for days, right? And then somebody just happened to mention like something. I wasn't telling anybody what it was, but then they said it was like anxiety. I was like, I wonder if that's what that. Hey, that might be what that is. Maybe I should look that up.
You say you weren't saying anything about it, but I tell you, the one thing that people are really not helpful about is if you're having an anxiety attack. They are not helpful at all.
So, I just force myself to do shit.
Yeah.
Regardless, right? Like, so I in both cases. And as far as public speaking goes, I don't know, maybe it's just youth and growing up with a brother who was a performer. Like, they make you go out on stage when you're a kid, and they coach you a lot on like stupid things to do, like imagine the audience naked or whatever the fuck.
Or pick one person.
Yeah, something like that, right? And I think pretty early on, I noticed that if I could get through the first 2 minutes, that everything else was fine. Like, I didn't even think about it after that. But then there was a lot of really good advice, like on going on stage, which was it doesn't matter what you do when you're out there, even if it's a mistake. The audience is going to love it.
The audience wants to enjoy themselves. They don't want to fuck this up. Right. They don't want to go, boo, fuck you, you suck. Right? That's not why they're there.
So even if it's a mistake, you just continue to roll with it. And just even, you find out even that you can roll that into the whole act of being on in front of people.
And then, they do this in jazz improv. You make a mistake, you repeat it. That's and then you make it a theme of whatever you were doing at the time, and until everybody goes, wow, well, I would never have thought of that. And you go, neither would I. I made a mistake. I heard it, and I went back and I repeated it, and then I explored it.
Now it's not a mistake anymore. That's great.
Yeah.
But
it's also, there have been a lot of performances that I've done that was something that I wasn't very good at.
Yeah.
And that will also sort of dictate what your later experiences are like.
Yeah.
But I've never had a bad experience playing guitar.
Right.
And I've never had a bad experience with public speaking where I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Because like you're so well versed in whatever it is you're doing, you just happen to go through that. Well,
the idea of being under fear and having to act that you're feeling the right thing, that you should just fucking act and to the situation, and that makes a lot of sense to me. And then,
but the other thing that's referring there is that like the, performing, being in front of people, anxiety, this is all vulnerability. But there's a different type of vulnerability where the artist is alone, right? And you're dumping something, whether it's, you're writing a story, like this is some observation you make of the world, whether it's art, stories, music, you've written something. And now you've got to turn around and like present it.
Yeah, that can be a thing.
Yeah.
But
which I know that a lot of people that will never present. Right. Like they'll burn their shit in the front yard first.
That's right.
And they have.
Yeah.
they'll go, no, I don't want anybody to see this shit. I don't, you know, like, this is too important to me, or
Yeah.
or it's like I can't. I'm so ashamed of my particular perspective on the world that I can't fucking do this.
Or sell it. It's not for sale.
Yes, I know a lot of I can't fucking sell this.
It's bullshit.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny.
It's all my bullshit. Yeah. That's.
Oh, I can't sell it because it's not good enough, or
it's too personal, or like.
Everything's for sale. I
Yeah,
get it. That's
yeah.
a good mantra to have, actually. Everything's for sale.
It is. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anyway, those are the things I would think of in terms of fear. Like, a lot of the time, it's just that I feel like I'm wasting my time. That's, I think,
No, it is.
the big fear. And maybe I am.
Well,
But I mean, going back
yeah.
to what I was saying earlier, like if I have nothing else, I had a good time.
Right.
Then that's a good day in your life.
Right.
You know, that's why not? Why not just for that?
Right. And most of that shit is like with fears. As soon as you drag it out to the light of day, you know, you realize whether it's a rational fear or not.
Yep.
Like, I'm afraid of being homeless. I could be you know, the real fear is that I could be one paycheck away from being homeless. But if I continue to act like and try to work towards a paycheck, you know, usually.
Well, you know, I could be homeless.
Yeah, right.
Like but it's not the end of the world.
Right.
You know, that's also that.
But a fear of the unknown.
Yeah, that too.
is
I mean,
just
I'm
kinda
going
like,
through a lot of that
what are you
right
gonna
now
do with
anyway,
What
right?
are you gonna do with that?
Fear of the unknown. Yeah, no shit.
You can't do anything with that. That's fucking irrational to me. And it's like, well, fucking
jump.
yeah, you might as well.
Might as well just jump.
Boots in.
Yeah, and then you figure it out when you get there.
That's right.
I mean, it's not like I have to do anything different when I'm not being creative.
Right.
Like if I'm, you know, I'm traveling as a consultant, I have no idea what I'm walking into most of the time. Any meeting I'm going to, because I deal with so many different people. Like, I could go, oh shit, I don't know what's going to happen there, and then I would never get anything done.
Right.
But I don't know. To say it's just jump in.
Yeah.
Especially.
Totally.
I think that's the whole point of it anyway. Like even the stuff you were talking about with Iggy Pop.
Yeah.
Just like fucking jump in.
Yeah. You might as well.
Thank you for listening to the Twisted Pop Podcast. For show notes, go to twistedpop.com/podcast. Merchandise at bigmyth.com. That's big-myth.com. In association with nquick.com. Until next time, this is the Twisted Pop Podcast.